Hey guys, it's Sasha. Rachel Reeves, the new UK Chancellor, is actively destroying the economy. But even worse than that is the fact that she doesn't seem to understand what it is that she is doing. Either she genuinely is so bad at her job that she doesn't actually get it, or she does understand what she is doing but prefers to gaslight the British public because she doesn't have any better ideas or doesn't know how she should be doing a job. Either way, it is incredibly pathetic. This morning, new data has come out that the UK economy grew by just 0.1% in the third quarter, and in the most recent month, in September, the economy shrank 0.1%. This is before the budget where this new Labour government has decided to go and nuke the economy. And in that latest budget, the UK government increased the national insurance tax paid by employers from 13.8% to 15%. At the same time, they chose to reduce the threshold at which it is paid from £9,100 to just £5,000. According to the Office of National Statistics, the median salary in the UK was £37,430 back in April, and since salaries are still growing at 4.8% a year in the latest data, that means that the median salary now is more like £38,300. Now, I whipped out my calculator, and on a £38,300 salary, the national insurance is increasing from roughly £4,000 to £5,000 a year. So this is an extra £1,000 tax per average employee that every company has to go and find somewhere. The problem with the UK government is that they don't understand how a business thinks about salaries. The fact that pretty much none of them have ever actually worked in a normal, everyday, regular business probably doesn't help. When a business works out how much it costs to employ someone, they have to go and add up all of the costs associated with having an employee. This includes the salary and all the other stuff, like taxes, pension contributions. So when you go and increase the taxes, it means that it suddenly costs that business money, more money to employ that person. And at the moment, salaries are themselves growing at an average rate of 4.8%. So for an average salary, that is an increase of about £1,800 a year. Businesses are already struggling with that rate at which salaries are going up, but now the national insurance increase sticks an extra £1,000 on top. So instead of having to pay £1,800 more this year, that increase is now £2,800 for the median employee. The UK income tax system is incredibly stupid, because we have three separate taxes that actually all do the same exact thing. They tax your income. First there's income tax, then there's also national insurance, and then we also have employers' national insurance. The theoretical idea is that the national insurance bit is meant to fund pensions, fund welfare, unemployment and all that jazz. And the income tax funds all the other stuff. But the truth is, when you go and pay income tax and national insurance, they end up in exactly the same pot. It's exactly the same batch of money. They get paid into the same exact HMRC bank account. When you pay your national insurance, it doesn't go into a magic separate pot with your name on it waiting for you to reach pension age. No, there is no such pot. It all goes into the same giant bag of tax, and the government then goes and decides how to spend it. There is only one reason why national insurance and income tax are separate, and this reason is that it makes the tax look smaller. It makes it look like the tax is not that high. That is it. It's incredibly pathetic and lame, because the government can pretend that the lowest rate of tax after that initial 0% tax bracket is just 20%. So low, right? It's not that much, but the truth is, it is completely not true. It is bollocks. That tax is actually 43%. And if you went to university, well, for you it's 52%. If you earn just the minimum wage in the UK, then the highest tax bracket that you are paying is 43%. Because on top of the 20% income tax in that tax bracket, you also have to pay 8% in national insurance. But not only that, the employer also has to pay their national insurance. So at the moment it's 13.8%, but the Chancellor's just increased it to 15%. So you have 20% income tax, 8% national insurance, and another 15% national insurance paid by the employer. And as far as the employer is concerned, all of those taxes, they're just part of the cost of employing somebody. They have to pay it. They don't really care who specifically they're paying it to. If they didn't have to pay the employer's national insurance, they could instead be paying that 15% to the employee, because that is already part of the budget as far as the company is concerned for the cost of that employee. It's tax on the employee's wages. It's nothing else. People pretend that it's some kind of business tax. It's not. If that employee did not earn those wages, that tax, the employer's national insurance, would not be due. The employers actually have a bunch of other costs on top, and they have to pay another 5% at least in pension contributions, etc., etc. But this tax system is just smoke and mirrors and pretend. It's designed to stop employees realizing just how much money is actually being taken by the government in taxes. It's intentionally obfuscated, because if you split the total tax, the actual tax rate, into 3 separate little taxes and call them different names, well then each one of those taxes doesn't look that big by itself. But here is a little table of what the actual tax rate is in the UK. So if you earn very little, you pay nothing up to £5,000. If you have a part-time job or something like that, you might pay 15% on earnings over £5,000. The vast majority of people, around 70% of the UK, sit in this tax bracket in the middle, and this is where you pay 43% tax. If you earn a bit more, you jump into this next category. So here the employee national insurance contributions drop from 8% to 2%, but the income tax increases from 20 to 40%. So the actual tax rate, when you sum those things up, becomes 57%. So 57% of whatever your salary is gets paid in tax to the government. So whatever salary you earn within this bracket, more than half of that amount also gets paid to the government in tax. Then if you earn over £100,000, well then your tax becomes insane, because from £100,000 you start losing the 0% tax-free personal allowance. So that first £12,570 where nobody pays income tax, you start paying 40% income tax on that instead. So if you earn over £100,000, your income tax actually really becomes 60% all the way up to £125,000. Then you also pay 2% national insurance and 15% employer's national insurance. So the total marginal tax rate on someone earning between £100,000 and £125,000 in the UK is 77%. Insane. And above £125,000, you already lost all of your tax-free allowance, your income tax becomes 45%, and you're actually then paying 62% of your income to the taxman for everything above that. This is the real level of taxation in the UK. And if you went to university, then you also have to pay your student loan. Because in the UK, student loans are basically a tax. They work exactly like a tax. If you earn an income, you have to pay this until the full amount is repaid, whenever that might be in the future. If you don't earn an income, you don't pay it. It's a form of income tax. So if you are a young person that has been to university, you just got your first job, you get paid, I don't know, the minimum wage, above the minimum wage, 30, 35,000, 40,000 pounds a year, whatever that is, your marginal tax rate is 43%, and then you also pay 9% to your student loan. So your real tax rate in that first job on a not particularly big salary is 52%. I know it sounds insane and bonkers, but in the UK, when you graduate from university and you go and get your first job, your marginal tax rate is already over 50%. And the majority of people in the UK go to university. So this literally applies to most people. The big problem in the UK is clearly in government spending, because there is no way that we are being taxed at source more than 50% on income, which is the case. I just showed you the data. The majority of people are paying more than 50% tax in the UK in reality. There is no way when everybody who works pays that top tier of 50% plus tax, and then that's not enough to pay for basic services and welfare. But you know what? nobody wants to go and look at the spending and go and find all the waste. Nobody wants to go and find all the consultants and all the other people leeching off the government and collecting huge paychecks instead of money actually going to the direct cause for which it is intended. Maybe it's because the government is incompetent and have no fucking idea what it is that they are doing. Maybe it's because they're all just too comfortable in their cushy jobs. They don't want to rock the boat. Maybe it's because it's their friends who are collecting the paychecks. Now, maybe the government is happy that there appears to be this huge inefficiency, corruption in the system, a giant waste of everyone's money. I don't know which reason it is, but it's got to be one of those things, right? How do you tax the entire country more than 50% of their income in those tax brackets and then still not have enough money in the budget and you have to go and run a deficit? How does this happen? After Rachel Reeves increased the national insurance tax in the UK, the government then began gaslighting everybody. The Treasury published a tweet that said no increases to rates of income tax, national insurance or VAT. And given the fact that an increase to national insurance was by far the biggest announcement in the budget, well, obviously everyone was a bit miffed. It's not just disingenuous. It's not just a matter of different interpretations. It's just a pathetic lie. It's despicable. Also, they actually did increase VAT. They introduced VAT on private school fees, and they stripped those schools of being able to claim charitable status, which means they now have to pay huge business rates as well. And they did that with zero preparation of the state school system, which is already bursting at the seams. Oh, and they also froze the income tax bands until 2029, which means that income tax is actually increasing in real terms because of inflation. And I know the government likes publishing data in real terms, but for some reason, not for this particular bit. So after everyone pointed out that the Treasury is completely full of shit and completely lied, they had to delete that tweet. But it just gets worse, because this budget was meant to be the one helping working people. And you know what is now happening after the big increase in national insurance tax? Well, JD Sports have said that they will have to increase prices because of the budget. The pub group Fuller's have announced that they will have to increase their prices too. Wetherspoons said that prices will have to increase. Marks and Spencer and Sainsbury's have announced that they will be forced to increase their prices because of the huge cost of the national insurance increase. You have to remember that at the same time as this new tax comes in, a big increase, the UK is also increasing the minimum wage by 6.7% to £12.21. So if you employ a lot of people on minimum wage or around that area, congratulations. The minimum wage goes up by 6.7%, way ahead of inflation, etc. And the national insurance increase adds another 3.3% to anyone earning the minimum wage. So that means that the cost of employing someone on the minimum wage goes up by 10% in 1 year as a result of this budget. And that's before you account for the fact that average salaries are already growing at almost 5%, which is on top of the 10%. And a 10% increase in salaries when you're a supermarket and a huge part of your cost is paying salaries is very difficult to swallow. I guess Rachel Reeves thought that supermarkets and all the other companies can just find the money in the magic money tree, But it turns out that they're going to have to increase prices and fire staff instead. I know, what a fucking surprise, right? Companies like supermarket chains run on very low margins. If your staff begin costing you 10% more, like the cost increases by 10% overnight, well, no shit. You are going to have a problem. You are going to have to urgently do something about it. Services inflation in the UK continues to be very high. It was 5.6% in the most recent data. It refuses to go down. And the reason it is so high is because wages in the UK and taxes on those wages are going up at a staggering rate. I don't know what Rachel Reeves thinks is going to happen when these new increases come in a few months. The answer is every single service provider is going to go and pass those increases on through higher prices. These businesses are not suddenly going to become charities and decide to make losses because the government increased taxes while paying higher taxes to the government out of the goodness of their hearts. That's not how the world works. It means that those companies will hire less people. It means they will have to let some of those people go. And it means that they will increase prices. It really is not rocket science. The fact that the people at the Treasury did not think about this is staggering. Or maybe they did think about it, but thought, fuck it, let's do it anyway. And then, if all of those tax increases were not enough, we just heard that council tax is going up by more than £100 on average next year. We know that Labour promised no tax increases for working people, literally the phrase, and of course we all know that no working person in the UK pays council tax, right? You know, the tax that every single person who lives in the UK has to pay for living in a house. The increase in council tax is going to be 5%, much higher than the apparent level of inflation. And you know what the real kicker in the nuts is? This is just the worst. The reason that council tax is going up so much is because the councils cannot afford to pay the increased minimum wages to their staff and the extra national insurance for their employees. So now we're all getting a massive increase in council tax so that the council can then take that money and pay more tax to the government. What the actual fuck? We are being taxed more than 50% on incomes already. And then you have to pay council tax, £200 something, whatever it is a month. That's probably 10% of a typical average take-home pay right there. Then you have to pay VAT on everything you buy. I mean, call me cynical, call me dumb, right? Call me simple, but if you are the government and you cannot work out how to manage your finances, where the effective tax rate, taking everything into account, is probably somewhere in the 60 to 70% range, maybe it's higher. If you can't work out the finances while already taxing people 60 to 70% in real terms, then I would dare say that you have no fucking idea how to do your job. And you absolutely must be wasting colossal amounts of money somewhere in the system. Because where else is it going? The UK economy has already stagnated for 5 years. There is no growth. The next 5 years looks even more bleak.